We're talking today with Ray Fischer of Kentwood, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay. Now, Mr. Fischer, can you begin with a little bit of background on yourself? To start with, where were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids.
Okay, in what year?
On Mason Street, in 1924, November the 27th.
All right.
Yeah.
And what did your family do for a living then?
My father was a tool maker. Yeah, and he worked at Wolverine Brass, as I remember. He worked at Tenray before that. But he said during hard times or the strikes, he worked for the railroad. Yeah.
Okay. Now, was he able to keep a job during the 30s?
He had a job every bit of time. Yep.
All right.
In fact, I got an award from the government, the Navy and the Army, of the best tool made for the military, and it gave the longest production without a breakdown. Mm-hmm. I got it into my group, yeah.
All right.
Records.
Okay. Now, how much education did you have?
I went through the 12th grade, and then I went to junior college afterward.
Okay. And what year did you graduate from high school?
It was in Greenville High that I graduated from, and it was off season, so I never went through the ceremonies, so to speak, and I got my credits in February.
Okay.
And then I went to work for Gibson. And between that time and then I was working the farm. I had 220 acres, and I had a contract with Brown Seed Company, and I raised beans. And then come August, in September, when they're supposed to harvest them, I was unavailable. The government says that they needed me. So I ended up going to Fort Custer, got it enlisted, got my shaving cream and my towel and so on.
Now, what year was that when you were drafted? Was that 43?
Drafted in 43.
Okay.
August 43.
Now, Greenville had a factory there where they manufactured gliders.
Oh, yeah, they were making gliders, and I was working there. I had a second shift, so I worked on the farm in the morning, and then went to work in the afternoon until midnight, then come home, slept a little bit.
I hope so.
Had two jobs, yeah.
Yeah, and farm work is not easy.
No.
So add that to a second shift.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Now, did you own the farm you worked on, or were you renting that?
No, father did.
Okay.
Yeah. My grandfather had it, and then they split up, and then something happened through legal action that they inherited it.
Okay. All right. Now, you were working in the glider factory, and you were working on a farm. Now, sometimes men who did that kind of work could get deferments from the draft. Now, did you try to get a deferment? Or?
Oh, yeah, tried it. No, didn't work, no.
So did they give you a reason why it didn't work?
No,
They just took you. Well, did you have any brothers at home or anyone else in the family to work the farm?
No, yeah, I had a brother that was born in 1940, so he was 3 years old.
Yeah. So he wouldn't be much help on the farm yet then? No.
And then my father separated with my mother, and so there was that the problem. So I was pretty much on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you say, okay, you're drafted in 43, you're sent off to Fort Custer. What happens at Fort Custer?
No, very, very little. I mean, we got acquainted with everybody, and in the barracks there, but no, I don't remember much about Fort Custer except getting my towel and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because they send you off then to basic training after that.
Well, you go home for a short visit, and then you're off on a railroad car going to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, what's
that Rainbow Division.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what sort of place was Camp Gruber? How would you describe that?
More just like any other, like Camp Hood, Texas, about the same. Yeah, the same.
Okay. Now, people who are watching this interview are going to be people often younger than I am who will not have seen a World War II Army base. So what did it look like? What were the barracks like? What was
Oh, they were
there?
on stilts. They were on stilts. Then they had garbage cans everywhere. So you didn't have many flies, no. They had that under control, yeah. And you got up in the morning and got on your calisthenics and go back and forth, 6 o'clock. Yeah. You had to make your bed and make sure that it'll bounce. A coin will bounce on it, yeah. But, yeah.
So you get a lot of physical training, you learn Army discipline.
Yeah.
Did you get weapons training then?
I say some. But what you got most is crawling on your belly and people firing over you to make sure you stay down.
All right.
And I learned that quick.
Okay. Now, did you adjust to Army life pretty easily? Did you learn the rules and do it, or did you have trouble?
No, I did it as they suggested. Yeah. In fact, when I got out of the war, over the war, and got into Camp Hood, Texas, where I was in, I trained the other groups with mortar fire, and I fired a mortar, and I trained sanitation, and I don't know, some other else.
Okay.
But there was 3 different ones that
Right.
I trained.
Okay. Now, about how long was the basic training?
3 months.
Okay. And what did you do after you completed basic?
Then I went home for a furlough. Then we went back to a main camp that, God, I don't. We just did regular just maneuvers,
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you've got a picture in your collection of a place called Camp Phillips in Kansas.
Oh yeah, that's the camp that we ended up just prior to going overseas, and that was nothing to brag about. That was a tar paper shack, and it looked like tar paper. Yeah, and yeah, and there I don't remember bunks or nothing. I think we slept on the floor there. Yeah.
All right. Now, were you at another camp before Camp Phillips, or between Gruber and Phillips, or?
I don't know. We went right to the ship overseas from Camp Phillips, Kansas. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you left Camp Phillips, so where did they send you? Do you remember what port you shipped out from?
New York.
All right. And what kind of ship did they put you on?
It was a big one. Now, you could ask Germany, and they could tell you, right to the T. And, but no, I don't remember a ship. But I do remember the fella singing, oh gosh, now I don't even remember that, about Sunday. God, I know it too.
Oh.
But anyway, he sang that song while we were going over in a group. Convoy.
Okay. Now, were you going over as part of a unit, or were you going to join units after you got to England?
Well, that I don't know. All I know is I was on a boat and I was with a convoy. And when we got there, the English set up tents, and we stepped in tents. And I never had to get up in a night to go to the little restroom, but there I had to go every night. That damp weather, that really gets you. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you remember when you got to England? Was it early '44? Was it kind of wintertime and cold and wet, or?
I would say in April.
Okay.
April we got in June. Yeah.
All right.
April.
Okay. Now, on the voyage over, when you were with the convoy, did you have any bad weather?
Oh, yeah. You couldn't even see the big boat next to you. The waves were so high, and that fellow there, he was smoking a pipe with had a little screen net on, a cap on it, and he says, I'm never bothered with his flesh. And by God, he got sick. Yeah. But no, it didn't bother me. But I didn't care for it.
Mm-hmm.
No.
All right. Now, did you have any U-boat scares? Did the conflict?
U-boat?
U-boats, yeah.
No.
Okay. Because
No.
you didn't have to worry about that
No,
anyway.
no. We had boats all around us.
Mm-hmm.
And if a submarine got sunk a boat, I wouldn't even know it, you know. It'd be sunk and you wouldn't see it.
Okay. But as
Yeah.
far as you knew, it all went pretty
Yeah,
smoothly
yeah.
except
As
for
far
the
as
weather.
I know, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember where they landed you in England? Did you go to Glasgow, Scotland, or to Bristol?
Liverpool,
or
England.
Liverpool. Okay.
Liverpool, England, I remember it, yeah.
All right. Now, and then did they put you on a train and send you somewhere else, or did you just camp in Liverpool?
No, we was right there. God. Well, it wasn't in no town. It was in a suburb
Right.
that we was. There was a little village close by, where years ago they had a little storefront in front of a house. Well, this is what they had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, little storefront in front of a house in the little village.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
did they let you go into the village, or did you have to stay in the camp?
We got out once in a while, but no, not much.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't much.
All right. Now, at this point, were you part of the 79th Division? Had you been assigned yet?
Oh yeah, yeah. We was 79 when we went over. It was
Right.
79.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then, so you're there. So it's early 44. Now then, the D-Day landings start in June 6th of 44.
Yeah.
All right.
Right early in the morning, we were off on the boat, and they had big, heavy rope. That's what you climb off the rope and got out on those flatbeds.
Into the landing craft.
Landing craft, yeah, that opened up, with a bang,
Mm-hmm.
and off you went. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now they were using they were using those to land troops over the beaches for a long time after D-Day itself.
Yeah.
Now, when you landed, were you being fired on?
I was in the second wave,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how it happened, but anyway, the captain allowed me to be with the kitchen group.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the company was on the shore, and they had barbed wire up there and crosses, right at the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that we had to go around.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we was half a mile from the beach. And we was there probably until July the 3rd. July the 4th is
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, July the 3rd, we made the attack. And that's when heck broke loose.
All right. Now, I want to back up a little bit. Now, the written history of the 79th Division and all the official records, those indicate that the division landed over Utah Beach on the 12th of June, but you would have stayed right in that area for a while. But then most of the division attacked Cherbourg at the end of June, because that's the French port in that area. And your regiment, the 315th, was involved in attacking some of the fortifications around Cherbourg. But did you basically just stay in camp or stay in one place until July 3rd?
We were more or less in one place till July the 3rd,
Okay.
and they made patrols.
Right.
And some of the captains didn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
They at that time, I think they were head of the patrols.
Right.
And they got booby trapped,
Okay.
The Germans had them.
So you were basically working with the cooks, or?
No. I just happened to go over with
Oh, you just
them.
landed with them?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
all I did. Yeah.
But you don't remember attacking any German fortifications or things like that?
Until July the 3rd.
Okay.
That's when I really
All right.
got to know them.
Okay, so let's focus then on that. So now there's a large-scale attack that's kind of going south into Normandy. What kind of country were you fighting in then on July 3rd? What was that like?
Well, we was in swamp area. I was up to here in water. I kind of bent over, have my helmet just above the water, because the machine gun fire was just over our head, and I kept it down as low as I could. And one fella, as we left, I crawled on my belly, and he got up on his hands and knees, and he got it right in front of me. He got killed. And we were supposed to move out. Mm-hmm. We weren't supposed to take care of anybody that was wounded. We were supposed to move, and that's what we did.
Okay. Now, can you describe what you remember about what you did that day? You said you're in the water,
yeah,
pretty deep, and people are getting hit. Now, were you able to keep moving forward?
Oh yeah, we kept moving forward, and then at nighttime they brought in our sleeping bags, and yeah, it was every night move, and that's what we ended up doing. Yeah.
Now, was your company taking a lot of casualties at that point? Were a lot of men getting hit and going out?
Oh yeah. We had replacements after replacements. Yeah. One fella was from New York. He had a family, and he was leaning up against a tree, and they had a kind of a circle front there, and somebody up ahead, the Germans had dug a ditch, and the Americans couldn't move their tank across it. Now this is after the hedgerow fighting. That hedgerow fighting was a mess too, but what was I going to say?
You're talking about the man from New York standing up against the tree?
Yeah, he stood up and telling me about his family, and he got shot. I was laying as close to the ground as I could. That's only how I'm alive. Yeah.
And this fellow was one of the replacements?
He was a replacement.
So he didn't know to duck?
I told the fellas, whenever we attacked, I says, stay out of the line of those tracers. Stay out. And one fella, he didn't behave. He didn't follow my orders. We attacked at a pillbox, and he got shot. And what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You tell them, and they don't take the warning. You just can't make it.
Okay. Now, when you were doing the fighting in Normandy, so you were fighting in swamps some of the time, and you said you were also talking about fighting in the bocage, in the hedgerows.
Hedgerows, yes.
What do you remember about that?
Well, they couldn't use tanks because they were vulnerable when they got up. And the Germans they had their sights all set up, and their mortar shells would come over and bounce on the ground and blow up. And I was over here, and a hedgerow along there, and a mortar shell dropped, another one dropped, and I said, next one is going to be here. So I said, I'm going to move over there. So that's what I did, and by golly, the next one dropped where I was.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, what could you do to get through the hedgerows? If the Germans were defending, how could you beat them?
Well, I got out there, and I was out about 100 or so yards, and they start shooting at us. They're shooting at me. In fact, the company started to come over the hedgerows, and I was out there 100 yards or more, and the Germans started shooting when the company come over, and the company turned around and went back, and I didn't see them that night, the next day, and I laid there until nighttime, and I crawled on my stomach and went over to the next hedgerow, and I followed the hedgerow back. I got on the road, and I come on to a farmhouse, and there was a dog. He was barking away, and I said, this is no place to be. So I got out of there, and then I went down the road a ways, and I got some leaves, and I laid my gun down and covered up with leaves. I laid my raincoat out, and I laid on that, and I stayed there all night. The next morning I moved on, and finally I run onto our own company. And I was sitting down on the ground, and the British were telling about the Americans didn't design the military pockets. Anyway, they were losing their wallet. So I got up, and I felt my wallet, and it was gone. I turned around, it was laying on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So the news of the radio informed me that I lost my wallet.
Right.
Now that's good. Something, yeah. But anyway, then I got in some Jeep guys and also their artillery fellas that were carting the artillery around. Anyway, they decided they were going to get me back to my company. And I got back to the company. And there was a mean sergeant. And I wanted to be on this side of the hedgerow. And because it was a 3-man place, I could sleep for 3 hours instead of 2. Well, anyway, he wouldn't allow it. So I had to be on the other side with a 2-man out. So I was up every 2 hours. Anyway, yeah. So during that night, that foxhole got a mortar shell from the German. Mm-hmm. So he did me a favor instead of, yeah, trying to be mean.
Okay. Now, when you're in Normandy, once you started fighting in early July, did you pretty much keep fighting for the next several weeks most of the time?
Yeah, we were on the move after July.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, move. Yeah, we moved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, right around the beginning of August, that's when the Americans start breaking out of the bocage and getting out into more open country. So did things change for you at that point? Did the pattern of just movement or fighting change, or?
Well, yeah, there was towns that we went into and took over, and we were told that it was just a small amount of people in the town, and they were just full of Polish people with German uniforms, and they gave up easy.
Right.
And one time I was ordered to carry the anti-tank grenades, and I carried them, and I had blanks on the rifle to discharge them anyway. And one instance at this one town, the Germans were coming out with their Jeep, and someone saw it. They grabbed my rifle and my ammunition and took one of my grenades, and they must have pulled the pins on the rest of them, and I never knew it. And I was carrying them for days with no pins in there. And it was in September that we got shoes. We were all going to get shoes changed, and I happened to sit down and looked at it, and no pins in my anti-tank grenades. So I went over to the captain. This was on a hill here. And the captain, I said, what do you want me to do with it? Get him away from here, he says. Get him away from here. And he says, bury him. So I went over to a tree and on the down slope, and I dug a hole and I buried him. So somebody, when they cut that tree down, they're going to have a surprise.
Well, they didn't blow up when you were carrying them.
No,
so.
They might be lucky.
Yeah.
They might be.
All right. Now, as you were moving through France at that point, did you see much of the civilian population at all?
Yeah. As we went through France, the women, they liked chocolate, they liked silk socks. And of course they had the sewer running right along this road. And some of their places they had stockyard, they had it right alongside their house. They caught the hollow wooden shoes, and they carried them in the barnyard, and that was right their side porch, barnyard. And when they got to the porch, they took their they had slippers on, see? They'd take their slipper out of their shoe, their wooden shoe, and leave them out on the porch. That's how they kept it out. And their barn was in the back of their house. Of course, we wouldn't have that, that odor. Yeah, it gets pretty strong.
All right. Now,
But
okay, so then as you're moving across France, because you kind of go south from Normandy first and then you go west, do you remember any of the places you went through or went around? I mean, did you go to Paris or did you miss that?
oh yeah, they wouldn't let us go through Paris because we weren't in proper uniform. See, they had fresh troops go through. When Lowell Thomas he spoke of this Paris, yeah, we saw that afterward. Anyway, no, we weren't. I did see the trenches of World War One, south, and probably well, anyway, south of Paris. Yeah, yeah.
Now, when you moved across France, where were you going to? Did you go to Belgium or Germany or just eastern France? Or?
Well, we was quite a ways along, across France. We didn't go up to Belgium until last of October, 1st of November.
Right.
In November.
Okay.
And there was a big push up there, and so they wanted us up there, and they got us there. Yeah. But back in the beginning, we weren't in the hedgerow fighting, and across the river that we went, we were told not to drink the water because it could be poison. And we had gas cans, the regular ivory green cans. We had them full of hard cider. And the French, they had 50-gallon drums, wooden drums of that hard cider. So we had plenty of that. And one fella drank too much of it, and when he went across it, he'd have been killed because he went in there brave as all get out. But they had left, and under their bed they had their cognac with their wire mesh, baskets. Yeah, that's what they had under their bed. Yeah.
All right. Now, when you got out of the Bocage, you crossed northern France. Did you have much fighting to do until you got to Belgium or northeastern France?
In September, I know that we were relieved from some fresh troops, and we got one of these sea box. Anyway, it had powdered potatoes and it had jelly in it, and we got to sit down and we started to eat that, and we never got it finished, never got to eat it, and we were called to reinforce them, those troops on this hill that we already had taken.
Right.
And when we got there, on the way approach, we were bombarded with machine gun fire. But we probably had another 50 yards to go. But we made it by spurts.
Right.
Figured out when are you going to be relaxed to not shoot. Well, then you take your chance. And that's what we did. In sequence,
Right.
not all at once, no. Anyway, that's how we got there and got in there. And the fellas that were there, they left everything. They left a bazooka. They heard what they did. They heard the tank coming, and they wasn't going to stay to find out what they were going to. And we didn't know that there were tanks there. We didn't know it until it come dark. And if you want to have a heart ticking bad, is when they started their engines up. And we didn't know that they were had machine guns on top of the tank. Anyway, we stayed out, we held out, and they retreated. And
So the tanks didn't actually attack you? They
No.
just started their engines and they left?
But if they would have fired the gun, they'd have buried us alive, Yeah.
All right.
But they didn't do it.
Right. Now, in these first months when you're in France, did you have a lot of artillery support when you were fighting? Could you call in artillery, or
Oh yeah, I was on an outpost, and during the war, and the military was shooting artillery over our heads, and you hear it whistle by, and the captain, I was in this foxhole, and way out toward the enemy, and the company is in back here,
Right.
and the colonel, he decided to keep me busy, and he said, a man had a cart of apples, and he said he sold the first man half of what he had, plus another half of an apple. And he sold the second man half of what he had, plus another half of an apple. And he sold the third man half of what he had left, plus another half of an apple. Now he says, how many did he have in the beginning? And with about 5 minutes, I told him the answer. By determining what was possible, what wasn't. The key of it is he never cut any apples. That's the key. And I told him. And I don't know if he was, I asked that question from nurses and other people, and they never would come up with the answer.
Well, they would always forget the first part of the question.
Maybe.
And they'd be thinking about the other parts, trying to figure out the fractions of the apples.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
So he was doing this to keep you awake?
Maybe, busy, occupied, yeah.
Okay. So you had a lot of duties as scout or forward observer?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Because it sounds like by the time you're making it into September, you've got at least the core of your company is a pretty experienced group of men.
No, they
or
were.
there were just a few of you who knew what you were doing.
There were a few of us that knew. 10 to 20% was the only ones of the original. The rest of them were all substitutes. Yeah.
Right. And was it possible to give them much training? I mean, you said you tried to tell them what to do, and a lot of them didn't listen.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah,
but would some of them survive and then become better soldiers? So eventually,
if they survived it, they probably would become. Yeah.
All right. Now, was there a point in 44, as you're moving forward and you're doing all of this, did you get any amount of time for rest? I mean, you mentioned being pulled out of the line and going right back in again. Once you got into October,
only that one lousy week, and then the Red Cross we were told they had coffee and donuts, and we were told to bring our money, and I thought that was pretty raunchy. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't usually pay for the Red Cross stuff.
No. But I never went there, but that's what I was told, see, to bring your money.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, once you kind of get into October and November, did they kind of move you into one place and keep you there, or?
No, we was in October, we was on a hill, or November, no, October. We was on a hill, and we were supposed to go into a town, and there was a fellow that called Tiny. And now here's another case. And same back of the hill where the machine gun from a tank was. These fellows are too antsy. They want to get from here to there quick, you know. And this white guy wants to talk to this one over here. So when they went to go from one foxhole to another, the darn Germans shot him. One got right to the neck, killed him. Well, that's stuff you don't do that. Well, now you're talking about on the hill, this Tiny, he had trenches, zigzag on this hill. And before that, there was a pillbox that we're supposed to take. And of course, they didn't occupy it. They didn't occupy the trenches. They occupied the town below the trenches. And when we started to attack, they fired from machine gun to machine gun this way. See? And of course, they figured that was no use. So they called in tanks. The tanks come in, and they stood up on top of the hill, and they was ordered to advance. And we were ordered to get out of the trenches and follow them. And the tank guy, whatever happened, got scared or get jittery or what, he got it in reverse. And the fellows that were out of the trenches and right in the back of that tank for protection, you understand that, got in reverse and ran over some of them, right there. Now, I didn't see the tank move, so I didn't get out of the trench. And I survived it. Well, when they stopped the tank either backed up or went somewhere else, and they got in some fresh tanks a couple hours later. And they put that thing in high gear and went right down there, and we followed them, and the Germans left.
Okay. Now, as you were advancing across France, once you were in the open country, how did you get around? Did you walk or ride in trucks?
Oh, walk, feet, that's the only thing. We went up on a bare hill, and apparently they pounded the hill with artillery. And on top of this hill, we could have been killed there over and over again. When we got on top of this hill, the Germans had their lunch buckets, and that's where I got that one slip there from a German field arm or book, and they what they had to eat. It's no wonder. The Americans were supplied with the best food, and sanitary food. Maybe it was too sanitary. I don't know. Of course, our water wasn't too good. I had muddy water in the foxhole, and I scooped it up with my canteen, put my pill in, and let it shook a little bit and drank it. I'm still here today, but I don't know how come.
I guess the pill worked.
Yeah,
okay.
the pill
So,
worked.
so you occupied a German position, and you found what kind of food did they have? This brown bread?
They had bread, and then they had sausage or something like that. They didn't have mustard and ketchup and peanut butter and stuff to put on there. And the Russians were worse than that, They had paper wrapped around their legs, yeah. And then they had scratch paper, pad paper, wrapping their bull derm in there. I smoked one of their cigarettes. Oh, I know why they like American cigarettes.
All right, let's going to go back here to the main part of your story. We've kind of made it into the fall of '44. You're still engaged in fighting on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Now, at some point, your division switches over from 3rd Army into the 7th Army,
Yeah.
and you wind up in sort of northeastern France along the German frontier.
Yeah. Well, then we went up to Belgium, and I went in the French Maginot Line. Was down there where the railroad tracks were narrow, and then I saw the bunks that they had, metal bunks. They had big guns with their Cosmoline in them. They never fired them.
Right.
And every other spot was a machine gun turret, then a big gun again. Yeah. And well, the Germans went around it.
Yep.
They weren't going to go through it.
All right. Now, did you occupy any of the Maginot Line positions yourselves, or did you just go past them and went somewhere else?
When we got there with the tanks, there was no. The Americans already took over.
Okay.
We were there. Yeah. Apparently, they didn't figure it would be taken over that quick. But they surrendered or whatever they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as it gets into kind of November and December, and the winter starts to come,
Yeah.
You were back down from Belgium by then, and you were in France, or?
Yeah, we went. We were still in France. Then we headed to the southern part of Germany, and then we ended up in Germany, and then we come to a town that was on fire. Barns were burning, and we got into a house. And, hey, a roof over our head. And we got in there, we got to where we undressed. We were going to sleep for the night. And 1 o'clock, we got orders to go out on this patrol. and that's when I got captured.
Okay. Now, you have in your collection of materials a newspaper article from January of '45
Yeah.
that describes the activities of your regiment. And
Yeah.
the big story was the Germans were counterattacking and you got into a big fight, and your regiment in the end held its ground and sort
Yeah,
of won the
yeah,
battle. So
yeah.
that's the bigger story.
Yes.
But
yeah.
what specifically happened with you? You said
What-
you were going to go on a patrol.
We're on a patrol, and we met this outpost. And this outpost was pretty well heavily guarded, and they shot machine gun fire across the road. We were on this gravel road, across the road, and I wondered why they didn't shoot it waist height. They would have got everybody. But they had troops on the other side of the road. We didn't know it. And I run right directly in front of three of them and around the side of a building. I went away from it. And I got on the other corner of that building. There was three Germans there. And he stuck his rifle right in front of my nose, about 2 inches away from it. And I took a hold of that rifle and I took it down like that. And well, then the other two, they had me.
Mm-hmm.
And they took me to their commander. And he says, "Are you hungry?" "No." "Are you cold?" "No." And so anyway, he talked to the Germans there, and they sent me down the road a ways into a church. And down in the church basement, here the guys, some of them were laying on cots about a foot high, no more than a foot. And some were laying on top of the dressers. They were laying wherever they could. But they were in the basement of this church.
Now, these were other American prisoners at that point?
No.
Oh, there's
these
German
were
soldiers?
All Germans.
Okay.
And I was the only one. I was the only one, because I went around this building. And I was taken in there, and he talked to the colonel, and he had me sent into a little fruit cellar in the basement. And there was a German that could speak English. He'd been to New York. And he told me that he didn't like New York. And he didn't like the way the Germans, he was in the German Navy for 5 years. And they put him in the Army, and he didn't like it. And then here comes the rest of them. So they ended up 7 of them. And the lieutenant that was in charge of patrol, he was captured. Mm-hmm. And he was there in the beginning of the training. I knew him, Paul Duncan. Mm-hmm. And some of the other guys were what do you call? Anyway, replacements. Mm-hmm. They were replacements. But Duncan was one of the original ones.
Okay. Now, did Duncan start out as an officer, or was he just
a private?
He was a private.
He was a private. Yep.
He was a private, just like you,
yep.
originally.
He ended up second lieutenant. Yeah.
And how did he become a second lieutenant?
Well, he was a fairly strong fella. Mm-hmm. I didn't weigh much over 120, 130 pounds, so I was a tyke, you know.
Right.
And he was heavier built, and he probably could give orders and make sure that he was taken, you know.
But
But he was a nice fella.
Yeah. But did he get a battlefield promotion? Your officers got killed and he moved up, or?
That's about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, a lot of replacements.
Yeah.
And that's probably the only reason I got to be sergeant is because I'm the only one, the old one that's left.
Right.
You know,
right.
there's a chain of command.
Okay. Now, before we came on for the interview, you were talking about that last patrol that you went on. How was that patrol different from earlier ones you've made?
Well, I was squad leader, and we went out and searched the enemy, and with caution. And when we heard a noise, we took note. And now, Duncan, he was ordered to make contact with his friends. Mm-hmm. And he believed it. even though you're fighting a war, two and two don't add up. Well, anyway, we went on the orchard, we went across field, we went down, got onto a road. We had zigzag back, and we got on this road, went right in there, and he heard something of it. He says, "Who goes there? Come forward to be announced or, recognized." And the third time we got a report of the burp gun, and you know who they were. Yeah. So
now, who gave the lieutenant the order? Why were
I suppose the colonel, whoever was at that house.
Okay.
At Straghausen, I believe it was. Anyway, when you're in the army and you're in the field, you don't see much road signs. You see the back roads. In fact, one place we were in a swamp, and we were set to take over the other side of the road because we want to cover just outside of a town. And doggone, the Germans' tanks were over there. And you should hear the commotion of those Germans. They were so shocked that the Americans were going to go on the other side to guard it, and they were over there, and they left. In the dark, they were. That's the trouble, the Army always wants to attack in the morning. That's no good. You want to attack in the evening when they're ready to take a nap. That's when they're vulnerable. They don't know what's up, see?
Now, would the Germans attack you at night?
No, they had their, what they call bed check Charlie. And a single plane, engine plane would circle around and watch for any light, any movement. And then they'd come back, they have their bomb. We would cross the bridge once, and the Germans had a bomber, and they dropped a bomb, and that bomb, well, it probably, it hit the edge of the bank of the river, and we was crossing this river on the bridge. And we missed it by probably 50 yards.
But in the combat experiences that you had, the Germans would not normally try to attack you at night on the ground?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I did one place, saw a woman, a French woman in a German uniform. Yeah. And I saw Russian women with a machine gun on their shoulder, directing traffic with their horse and buggy movement.
Now that's going to be sort of later on after you're out. Okay. Let's kind of go back again to the main line of your story. We've gotten to the point now where you and another 6 men from the patrol, they've been captured. Did you get to talk to the lieutenant at all at that point, or find out what happened, or did they just move you on pretty quickly?
No, I never discussed it. No, I don't know why. Well, I never did.
All right. So then what happened to you after the 7 of you were together? What happens at that point?
Well, we were taken out in the morning of this church, and we were marched. And as we left the church, we were, some Germans in their anti-craft guns yelled out, "It's a long ways to Berlin." Well, what are you going to say? So, said nothing. Anyway, that's the introduction we had. But when I left that church and was on that march, something left my forehead or head all the way down through my system and out to my toes. And I couldn't describe it, but it just felt that it was, I don't know, relief or what, but I was no longer on the front lines. Okay? Yeah. But one fella, when we went back to that hill that we were supposed to retake, that we missed our K ration, our C ration, that he shot a hole in his foot so he wouldn't go back on the front line. So he must have been, well, he didn't want to go back.
Well, and had you seen other men from your unit try to surrender before that?
Yes, in the beginning, before July the 3rd, we had on patrols, and we went across this river. On the other side, we was probably 100 yards or more away from the bank, and it was open field, just very small grass. Anyway, some mounds of dirt here and there, but anyway, when they start open fire on us, I hit the ground, and I laid there the rest of the day until I heard our forces back there moving around. I thought, they're going to attack, and I'm going to be in the middle of it, and the Germans are going to fire their mortar shells, and the Americans are going to... Anyway, I got to get out of here. So I shot spurts, and I run a little bit, hit the ground, run a bit, zigzag back and forth, and I got back there. It says we're moving out. And I was back as scout in the front, yeah.
But I had asked, did you see any of your own men try to surrender? Was there
Yes,
one there?
yeah. At that time, when we were pinned down, this fellow, a dark-haired fellow, he was from New York, I think, and he put up his hands and he ran right for the Germans. And I never saw him after that. Never know what happened to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at this point, let's see. Now, how did they get you from the front line area to the prison camp then? Once you were captured.
We marched about 20 miles a day, and we went to a jailhouse. We were held prisoner there. We were fed maybe pea soup. And in our bowl was our helmet was our bowl, and we got that and that. And then we went to from place to place, and then we went to a prison camp that had all nationalities. It was actually kind of like a barnyard, and it had covers for the cattle, and they had us separated, different nationalities. And then we went from there, some more march, and then we got on railroad cars, box cars, and we was on there for 3 days. And they give us one slice of bread and a piece of blood sausage. And that was a ration, no water, for those 3 days. And then we got out of there and did some more marching, and we ended up into another camp. And then we got in later on, a week or so later, we got in a regular camp that we ended up staying all the time. And then at night, we got information where the American troops were and the Russian troops. And the troops, the Americans stood still, and the Russians were allowed to come in and take the camp over. And we saw the Germans there guarding the camp one day, and one day we saw the German women, kids, baby buggies and all, headed for the American line. And the next morning, after that, we heard gunfire off to the American side. And so then we decided that all the Germans are gone. We went out through the fence and went down in a little village, and there was a baker that baked into a wall, cement wall there, and he had this nice round bread. And we asked him if we could each have a loaf, and he agreed with us. We didn't take any more, but the Russians come in there with their wagons and took pigs. The pigs were squealing and all, but they took them. And wherever they went, they ate. They picked up and ate. They didn't have their supplies brought to them.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
let's again moved ahead a little bit in the story. I want to kind of get back to
Yeah.
the time. What prison camp did they put you in? Was that Stalag 4B? Was that the...
Oh yeah, Stalag 4B, yeah.
All right. And now, was this a camp just for American enlisted men, or who was there?
Well, when we ended up, we had all we were taken prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
We were together.
Right.
We were put into a place where we were sprayed and insecticide, or defused.
Yeah, deloused. Yeah.
Debugged, yeah. And at first we were slept on the floor, and we was allowed 1 brick an hour of compressed coal. And one of the Germans told me, he says, "No, don't drink that cold water." He said, "It'll give you diarrhea." So he said, "When your system is down," he said, "don't do it." So I took his advice. Yeah. But we would get rations when we was in this permanent camp. We'd have 7 or 8 real marble potatoes. We had a soup that would consist of probably a Campbell canned soup, and it was mostly liquid. And a slice of bread. That was our rations for the day. Potato soup and the potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, were the other prisoners with you, were they all Americans then in the Stalag, or were there other?
No, different people, yeah. There was one Frenchman there. Boy, could he fight with his foot. You couldn't even get close to him. He could whip that leg up. Oh, man. Yeah. In fact, they fought over potatoes, skins. One of them, he peeled his potatoes, and he was going to save them till later. Well, the fellow thought, well, the guy didn't want them. That's understandable. He didn't want them, but he thought he would eat them later. And they got in a fight about it. Yeah.
Right. Now, were there Russian prisoners where you were, or just Americans?
Not that I know of. The only Russians we saw is when after we was captured,
right,
and the Russians took us over until we was released.
Right.
And then I never got released because I wasn't going to wait for that. A proper person wasn't there to sign, and then the Americans come in there, and then the Russians didn't have the proper person to sign off. So we went off on bicycles. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where did you find the bicycles?
Well, a little part here and a little part there, and we put them together, and we had 4 or 5 guys together. We were headed for the American lines, and we talked to the Germans and told us where they were, and one of the fellows, Cruz from New York, he turned back. He got chickened out. Mm-hmm. But when we got to the American lines, and the guy says, "You Americans?" and we said, "Yes." And they took our bicycles and carried us across the plank. They were making a bridge, or working on it. And they took us across the plank, carried our bike, and we all had to do was walk across, told us where to go, and we had easy street from then on. Yeah.
All right. One other thing. When you were taken prisoner, did the Germans take anything away from you?
Oh, yes. When we got into this city, it was leveled right down. But they had one building there that I saw that was kind of like a hall. And they had a counter there, Germans behind it, told us, "Take off your jewelry, take off your watch, any ring you got, you take it off." They took it. And take your wallet off, or your anything you got in your pockets, take them out. And they took our wallet and dumped all the script in one pile, and took our pictures and dumped them, and give us back our empty wallet and our dog tag. That was it. Yeah. And prior to that time, about a couple of days afterwards, we was taken into a house in the basement, and a guy says, German says, "Take off your pack, take everything out," and he says, Now he says, don't you think it's fair if I keep half of your cigarettes and give you half back? And what are you going to say? So we agreed to it. And so somebody had cigarettes that didn't have anything in the beginning, but they all was treated equally. So that's what happened there.
Right.
Yeah. And then another time we was interviewed, that was probably less than a week. And we was in a barn. And one person went into the house at a time. And they asked you, who's your company commander? And I told him, I said, you know just as much about it as I do. And they said, well, who's your company commander? You want to eat, don't you? Yeah. Who's your company commander? I said, you know just as much about it as I do. Well, you want a place to sleep, don't you? I said, yeah. Who's your company? I said, you know just as much about it as I do. Well, then he gets out a book. He gets out a book about that thick, about that wide, about that long. And he opens up to your division, Lorraine Cross. He says, you trained here, you got on a boat over in New York, you got on such and such a boat, you lived in Liverpool, England at such and such a date. They knew everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just little old me, they got all that information. It must have took a whole company command to gather all that information, but they did it. And then when we got on the confounded shore here in Greenville, we made those gliders to glide in to be pulled on bombers, you know, and to land in the coast. And here the Germans had great big posts up there, all the open ground,
Mm-hmm.
and the darn thing, I didn't see one glider, but also see all the posts too, that they were prepared for us
Mm-hmm.
to land there. Yeah, yeah.
Now, back when you were in Normandy, did you see any of those posts or things like that, or did you just not even think about it?
In the beginning, yeah, right at the coast, yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
they had them,
right at the
there
coast,
too.
yeah.
All right. Now, while you were a prisoner, did your family know anything about what had happened to you?
Well, yeah, they told me that they got wind of that I was missing in action,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. Now, my sister could tell you how many times they were told. I know at least a couple times, and maybe 3. Yeah.
But they never had word that you were a prisoner of war?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because missing in action, they just don't know where you are.
No.
And usually when people were taken prisoner, eventually some kind of notice goes back to the families, or at least for the air crew who were there for a longer time than you were, that would happen.
Yeah.
And it may be that you were captured late enough in the war that that system wasn't working so well.
Yeah.
But they were getting those notices anyway. All right. Now, were there other things that kind of went on in the prison camp that tend to stand out in your mind, or that you remember about just what it was like living there?
Well, the only thing is that they some group had radio contact on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
and they come in there and give us information of where the troops were, and it's supposed to be on the QT, whether the rush. Oh, yeah, one thing when in the camp there, they had mounds of dirt that covered the potatoes, and as they needed them, they dug them out of the dirt, and one of the potatoes fell off the wagon, and somebody picked it up. He was shot.
Mm-hmm.
Right in that camp.
Yep.
And we was out one time for wood detail.
Mm-hmm.
We pick up small twigs and everything, you know, for them to burn. And by golly, we got strafed from American airplanes, not knowing, you know, we were marching, and yeah. But we survived it anyway. Yeah.
Now, in general, how did the German guards treat you while you were in the camp?
fair as far as I'm concerned, yeah. Because, but at the end of the war, you know, what they did in the beginning of the war and close to the end, I think they had a different viewpoint. Yeah. So,
Okay. Now, what else do you remember about the Russians when they came? What?
oh, well, when we met the Russians at this college, we were in this college, and they were guarding the fence. And of course, we told the Russian guard that we'd bring them back cognac. But we never come across the cognac to come back. But he let us out, and we went in and searched the town. And that money I got, that was from one of the houses that were left open. And while we were on the main floor, the Russians were upstairs, and they come and saw us. And boy, they had a dirty look. And he says, "American?" And then he said, "Yes." And then he had a big smile on his face. So some reason or other, the Russians didn't like the English. I don't know why, but they had their reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they knew you weren't German, but they had to figure out if you were American or British.
Right,
or whatever.
right, yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, when you were in the camp, did you, let's see, what kind of, did you have barracks there or bunks or?
Well, in the first place, the first part, we laid on the floor, head to foot. And there was 100 and some odd probably in one barracks. Then, in the second barracks, we had straw bunks. Straw-based bunks. It was a little bit better, but no holiday hotel. You know?
Okay. And you were talking about not wanting to drink the cold water. Would you boil water so you could drink it, or what did you do?
No, just have it a little bit warmer than ice cold, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have any kind of entertainment or recreation while you were in the camp, or did you just sit around all the time?
No. You had a bowel movement once every 3 days. And no really recreation. You didn't go out and bat ball or, tennis ball or nothing, no.
Okay.
No.
Did anybody try to escape, or was there any talk about that, or did you just stay there?
Not that I know of. I don't know of anybody that tried to escape. I know at one time when I was interviewed at this house, and the guards took us out of this house and down the road, and a couple of Germans were guarding us on the way out, and I thought of escaping then. But then I thought, where am I going to go? And who am I contacting? And there was no options there. And so I just let them lead me on. They led me up the hill and off into another driveway or roadway, and anyway, to another barn. So we left one barn, interviewed, and went to another barn. So the fella never come back that left, see? They keep you in suspense. They want you to, follow their orders, see?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
also, one thing I should have asked earlier, in combat, were you ever actually injured?
no.
Okay, so you
No.
got through all of that,
All that.
got all the way to
that.
Germany, and then they captured you.
Even they had the Germans on one hill there in the marsh area that the tanks were. They had anti-tank guns shooting up in the trees, and hitting the trees, and they turned flak all around, all over. And a lot of guys got wounded from that flak. And I got hit.
Miss you. All right. Now, when you got back to American lines and the engineers got you across the bridge, did you eventually rejoin the 79th Division, or were you just sent back separately?
No. I never saw them again.
Okay.
Never saw
So what did happen to you then after you get back to American lines?
To what?
What happened to you after you got back to the American lines at the end of the war there?
Well, then we got back to Liverpool, England. First we left France on a airplane, and it was a rickety old plane. It flopped around. It had side seats, you know, metal seats along one aisle and on the other. And we got into to England. Then from England, we got on a boat. And that's how we come back. Yeah.
And was that an easy trip on the boat, or did they have bad weather? Or?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember. I know I didn't fly back.
Right.
I flew from France to England, but then the boat come back.
Right.
And most of that stuff, I don't even remember. It's a blank.
Right.
And now the trip over there, I remember that. I remember that song that they, oh gee, I know it every day, but it's blanked out to me now. Right. But the first time I ever heard it. And he sang that song.
And do you remember where you landed when you got to the U.S.? Did you go to New York or someplace else?
I think we were put right on a train, right from New York, from the boat to train.
Yep.
And I come back to Grand Rapids.
Right. Now, where did they actually discharge you? Did they do that in New York, or did they send you to Indiana or someplace?
Discharge was Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. All right.
And a woman over there, she says, you know, she says when the aerospace were there tracking the satellites, she says it cost you as much as to park as it did an apartment. And she says now, she says most of them have left, and it's a different story. Yeah.
All right. But then maybe they sent you to Houston because that was close to where you trained or something like that? Because normally they sent people, well, they sent you usually close to where they had sworn you in or initially trained you. But okay, but they sent you to Houston for whatever reason.
Yeah.
All right.
Texas.
And then you go back up to Grand Rapids. And then once you finally get back home, what do you do next?
Then I applied for unemployment, and then I searched for a job in Grand Rapids. I put an application at General Motors, and I found a job at Porter Machine Company on Front Street. And I worked there until I got a call from General Motors, said there was an opening there. And there's another story. I worked there as an apprentice, and I worked as a die maker there. And I got an opportunity to go on days, so I took a job at Jarecki Machine and Tool Company. And I went back to General Motors in 70 or 69, whenever they was on strike. And I went there, applied for a job. I was hired by the floor. He said, you come in the second shift, and he says, you come into work, and he said, we'll have you examined then, go through the nurse. And it happened to be while I was there yet, the nurse come out of a door and saw me. It must have made an awful impression on her, because my mother asked me while I was apprentice, I had a steel chip in my eye. And the doctor went to take it out. And he froze it. Well, then, I don't know, I complained or something, and he says, oh, there's another piece in there. So he froze it again. And he got the piece out. And, of course, Mother asked me all what happened. I told her. And she must have turned up a hornet's nest. Because when I went back there, the nurse saw me. She went to the personnel guy. The personnel guy called me up and says, you had a problem during your employment? And I said, I don't know medical problem. I had no problem. And then he got to the eye. Well, I says, I was home at that time. Now I'm married. And, well, the doctor didn't seem that make a difference. So I said, okay, no problem. I said, if you don't want to hire me, you're fine. So I went back home, and one time I got a job at over on Sheffer Tool and and no matter when I want to find work, I found work. Yeah.
All right.
So, and I never went back. I never bothered them.
Right. Now,
But the guy at Jarecki says, they can't do that. I says, they did. You know, the union can't do that. No.
right. Now, if you look back at the time that you spent in the service, in the Army, how do you think all of that affected you? Were you any different at the end of it than you were at the start, or did you learn anything of one kind or another?
Well, you can't trust everybody. I found that out. And you have to analyze everything yourself. And everybody's got their own opinion, which is fine. And people say you argue with them. I don't argue. I discuss. I don't. You got your opinion, I got mine. And if we don't agree, we don't agree. But I'll tell you my opinion, and let it go at that. And this idea, this country and the religious groups, each one wants them to follow their group. And that's the only way. There's two ways to skin a cat, you know.
Or 6 or 7.
Yeah, right.
Yeah?
So.
All right. Well, actually, that's a very useful kind of thing to have picked up, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it really is a pretty remarkable story that you've got. So I'd just like to thank you for coming in and taking the time to tell it to us and add it to our collection. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.